It's a great honour to be here with Gene Likens, who discovered acid rain and worked out what to do with it. We're at the American Philosophical Society. So Gene, how did you first become aware of this problem?
Well, we were starting the Hubbard Brook Ecosystem Study in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, and as a part of that, we wanted to collect and sample precipitation, rain and snow. So the very first sample of rain that we collected in June of 1963 was about 100 times more acidic than we expected it to be. And that was a big shock. We had no idea why or how did it get that way, how long it had been that way. And so that defined much of the research that I've been doing in the past decades.
So what did you do then?
Well, we set about to try to figure out why it was acidic and whether it was causing any environmental damage. We didn't know. And we found that the rain and snow were indeed very acid, and that they were being made acid, rain and snow, by pollutants that were coming from the Midwestern United States, where coal and oil were being burned to produce electricity, large electrical generating plants in states like Ohio and Indiana and Kentucky and Illinois, and that those pollutants were being given off in large smokestacks, and then the prevailing winds were carrying them to the east, where they were falling on the landscape as acid rain.
And obviously there are parallel things in Europe with Britain's pollution going over to Sweden and following on your research.
Absolutely. And the Swedes were not happy about the fact that their lakes in southern Sweden in particular were being polluted, and they were suggesting that it was coming from the Ruhr Valley of Germany and from the smokestacks in England. And, they were kind of sitting there, as we were in the eastern United States, sitting there saying, you're throwing your garbage on us, and don't do that. We don't like that. And so, yeah.
So what were the policy consequences of that?
Well, it took a long time to figure all this out, what was going on and what it meant. But the policy consequences were very much like climate change. They were controversial. The big power companies said, no, we're not doing anything bad. It's not us. We didn't do anything. So we had to find out if they were. We had to find out indeed where the pollutants were coming from. And so we worked on that, and we did that. And then we had to try to find ways that we could minimize it or reduce it. So that was taking on big, powerful, economically powerful organizations, corporations. And I remember one story. I met with one of the largest coal companies in the United States at a meeting. It was a private meeting. And during the meeting, one of the executives that was there said, "We have hired," and this is a quote, "a whole room full of PhD scientists to obfuscate, confuse, and delay at every opportunity the acid rain issue," unquote.
That's a remarkable confession.
It was. And I said, all I could think of was, how big was the room? How many people did you hire? And how can you sleep at night? And they said, well, we have to take on this policy because the power companies won't buy our coal unless we do. And I will not say what I just said to you outside of this room, but that is what, in fact, we have done. I was shocked. I was, I guess, very naive and wondering how things like this actually happen, but they do. So all of this led in a long series of studies and political conditions that we were trying to understand. I led a small group that met with President Reagan and the full cabinet in September of 1983, and trying to explain to them what acid rain was and why it needed to be reduced. So the policy considerations, it's a long story, but then finally in 1990, the United States passed almost unanimously in the Congress, unlike today's Congress. It wasn't unanimous, but it was almost unanimous in the Senate and the House, regulations to specifically reduce acid rain. So that was the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments. So as a result of that, today in the eastern United States and eastern Canada, which was also being impacted, we are about 85% less acidic than we were in the late 60s, early 70s, when we were at the peak of acidity. And so that's a huge success story. Excuse me, where we've attempted to resolve that problem and to minimize the impact of that pollutant on aquatic and terrestrial and human ecosystems. So there aren't many environmental success stories, are there?
Well, there's and it's fabulous that this has been done. It is one of the great environmental success stories. I guess alongside the ozone hole and DDT. Do you think there are any common
and lead.
And lead, of course,
lead
yes.
is probably another
Absolutely.
one. And so that brings up very clearly and sharply the question, well, how about climate change? Why can't we impact the thinking and the policy on climate change and do something about it? Because clearly it's having a more and greater impact environmentally and needs to be addressed. I've often asked myself, why were we able to influence policy and have the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments? Why? What were the factors that led to that? And I don't know that I know the full answer, but I think two of the important things were we used maps to describe what the acidity was like and how it was changing. And so we scrounged up every bit of data that we could find. And so we developed a map for, say, 1965, and then 1975, and 1985. And when you show those maps to the public or to anybody, a politician, you say, oh yeah, it's getting bigger and it's getting stronger. So that was a clear way to communicate that important finding. And the other one you'll chuckle at, and maybe you should, because it's cartoons. And there's been some
Really?
articles written about this where there were a lot of cartoons generated about acid rain. One of my favorite is the person is there with a skeleton of a large fish, and underneath the caption says, "An acid rain got to it before I could." Well, that's clearly not an accurate depiction, because of the acidity was never that strong to dissolve away the meat of a fish. And if anything, it would dissolve the bones before the meat, right? But that cartoon gave a picture to the public of something that was clearly not good, that was bad, and needed to be fixed, needed to be brought to conclusion. And so those two things, I think, were very important. And I've often wondered, is it okay to tell the little white lie of a cartoon? I mean, it's not right, but the message was impactful and led to action that was important. So we haven't reached that point with climate change, have we?
That's true.
We have not reached the public in a way that they say, oh yeah, that's really bad, we need to do something about it. And
we have the science, but not the action.
That's right, and we need to.
So, and But this is a fabulous success story, the acid rain story. It is one of the great science into policy success stories. So thanks very much for all you've done for making the planet a better place. And I know there are lots of accolades that you've had, but it is wonderful what you've done.
Thank you. Thank you.